Welcome to the studio at That Nerd Show. I'm Marcus Blake, and today we are speaking with director EVA ARIDJIS Fuentes for the
Hello.
documentary Goodbye Horses, The Many Lives of Q Lazzarus. And I know what some of you are thinking, who is this person? And you've heard the name Goodbye Horses, but you probably don't remember. But we're going to dive into the story of this cult song that you've heard from movies and how this project came about. Well, Ava, thank you. It's a great pleasure. So I just want to jump in and say, I honestly didn't know anything about this. I know the song. I remember it being in movies, and it's the famous dance scene from Silence of the Lambs, but I knew nothing about the artist.
Mhm.
And this was an incredibly fascinating story. Um, so getting into the film, we talked a little bit about your history and how you kind of got started into music and then eventually a director or whatever. What was it about this song that you liked and made wanting to know the story behind it's fascinating?
Um, so like many people, I first heard the song Goodbye Horses when I saw Silence of the Lambs in I think it was 93. And I was immediately struck by this very haunting song.
Right,
Um, and It's just a mysterious song because it's sort of, there's a dialogue between two people. You can't tell if it's a
right,
man or a woman singing. Um, and I tried to find sort of more music by this Q Lazzarus, the artist
right.
listed as, being responsible for the song, and I couldn't find anything. Um, I also tried to acquire the song because I used to, I have like 3,000 records and I used to DJ a lot. And it wasn't on the Silence of the Lambs soundtrack, it was on the Married to the Mob soundtrack because
Right.
Jonathan Demme actually used it in two movies in a row, which is very unusual. Um, and then I just started finding out a little bit about the artist, that Q Lazzarus was a African American woman from New Jersey named Diane Luckey, that she had met Jonathan Demme in the 80s when she was driving a yellow taxi in New
Right.
York City, and he had gotten into her car as a passenger, and she was playing her music. And he put her music in his next four movies, which was also Something Wild and Philadelphia, where she has a cameo singing at a party scene. And then um, she vanished, completely
Yeah.
vanished for 25 years, and not even her best friends and bandmates knew what had happened to her. So I kind of knew this stuff, and that's pretty much the only information that was available about her.
Well, the thing about Philadelphia, I watched that the other day. I hadn't seen it in like 20 years.
Hmm.
After I had watched this film, was like, what, she was in that? And I
Hmm.
had to go back. I was like, wow. And that was another fascinating story.
Hmm.
Um, because again, you think when we think about people getting their music in movies or TV shows or
Hmm.
whatever, they have a career.
Hmm.
Um, and even the one hit wonders sort of kind of get to do something and they don't really disappear, you
Hmm.
know. But she did.
Hmm.
Um, when did you start? You said you wanted to find out more information about her. This was like the after you had seen the movie in the early 90s when you were trying to find out.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously before the internet, right? So at that point, all I could really find at that point was the song on the Married to the Mob soundtrack,
Right.
which is where I used to DJ it, like a vinyl copy of that. Um, what I feel like what really the song definitely has a cult following. A lot of people are
Yeah.
very obsessed with it. It's very it's really been embraced by the goth community. It's been embraced by the LGBT community. Um, but a lot of this started in the 2000s, 2010s, like, with the internet and during the
Sure.
time that she was underground, where nobody knew where she was. So, um, like 20 different bands, at least 20 different bands have covered it, including MGMT and Crosses and um, just I feel like every year there's like three more covers of it, and I can't think
Yeah.
of another song from the 80s that's been covered as much as this one. Um, and then there was all this speculation online as to what had happened to her. So while she, um, as we see in the film, one of the reasons she disappeared, or what started kind of a whole um, domino effect of events for her, was that she couldn't get a record deal, that she felt like no one appreciated her music in the US
Right.
or the UK. Um, but then she disappeared, and while she was missing, the song blew up and speculation about what had happened to her blew up. And, so then when I met her in 2019, this landscape was very different from her.
Yeah.
She, which she wasn't aware of because she didn't have a computer, she wasn't on social media, she wasn't online much. So she had no idea that all this stuff was happening, around her song. And
Well, we because of the internet, because and really MySpace, because I became a haven for independent music artists.
yeah.
It was a lot easier to get your music out there to get discovered.
Hmm.
So you kind of feel like I'm watching this movie. I'm like, if this was 20 years later,
Hmm.
I think, she would have gotten a record contract. We would have had
Hmm.
more music by her, but it's caught in
Hmm.
that time and place where you really relied on corporate music labels.
Hmm.
And if they just didn't feel like you could sell, it's kind of like, publishing. Anybody can publish a book now. You don't have to go through that because there's way to sell and market who you are. Whereas you couldn't do that 30 years later.
Or filmmaking,
Yeah.
you can make a movie and, uh, if worse comes to worse, you can put it online and people can see it. And,
Yeah. Hey,
but the, the
Amazon
film,
might be the
yeah,
evil empire, but the fact that you can still put your film online and let people
yeah,
buy it and all that, I
and
mean,
YouTube, and yeah.
yeah,
I mean, my film, Goodbye Horses, The Many Lives, Q Lazzarus, I don't have a formal distributor.
right.
It's all been, programmers and people contacting me wanting to screen it, and I've been arranging everything. Um, there's no distributor. It's just been me, the filmmaker. So it's
Yeah.
been a very, I didn't actually know it was sort of still possible to release a film this way, but it is, which, it's nice to know that,
Also nice to know that we can put good things out on the internet and into the world compared to a lot of the shit that we get.
Hmm.
Um, so, not to make comparisons and stuff like this. One of my favorite music documentaries is about Rodriguez and
Hmm.
how that got tried. And it reminded me of that. I went back and watched that too
Hmm.
because he was somebody, and I bring this story up as I actually kind of knew about him because my first year at college, I knew a guy from South Africa who,
Oh, okay.
when you could mix tapes on
The Gateway, the
cassette, right.
Rodriguez Gateway.
You're right, exactly. I had heard like one song and he made a copy of it and it ended up
Mm.
somewhere and then had forgotten it about a years until some people, with the internet started, tracking him down and was he alive and all that.
Hmm.
And this film is very much in the same vein of, rediscovering her,
Hmm.
um, and the fact that she, her other music and stuff like
Hmm.
that. Um, I don't want to spoil the film. I mean, again, I went in completely blind. I didn't look anything up on her. I wanted to watch this film, and I'm
Hmm.
glad that I did it that way because it was shocking. I mean, I know that she's no longer with us and all that, but to get that part of the story, um, you started this in 2019 when you first
Hmm.
met.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, what was the most fascinating thing that you discovered about Diane when you started this process?
Um, I mean, I don't know if I can choose one thing. Um, it was everything from, um, the very dramatic um, details of why she disappeared and everything that had happened to her during this, 25-year absence, to hearing, having her hand me a huge box of tapes and dats, which I digitized and helped her copyright, and just listening to all this other music that she had created that, had never been heard by anyone except, some people that went to some shows of hers
Right.
in London, New York, Philly. So and then and then just discovering her
Yeah.
spirit, her, what an amazing woman she was. Like, so amazing storyteller, such a strong person, survived all this really heavy stuff and was not jaded, had a great sense of humor,
Yeah.
tells all these stories about really heavy things, and she always finds some way of injecting some humor into it somewhere. Um,
Well, I
you
know it can
know,
be edited as a
yeah.
filmmaker, but I felt like being very upfront, not shying away from living on the streets and
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
her drug problems and all that,
Hmm.
with a little bit of, with candor and laughter.
Hmm.
That was incredibly fascinating as
Hmm.
well. Um,
I
but
think, yeah.
so you talk about in the film too, having meeting her husband, having
Hmm.
a son, and all that.
Hmm.
That still she didn't really talk about like her past. That
Hmm.
she had this kind of moment of fame, and then it faded away, and
Hmm.
people started recognizing what they thought was her doppelganger in the movie
Hmm.
Philadelphia, and even her own
Yeah.
son. And then she tells all this truth.
Hmm.
Um, did you ever find out? I don't know if the film really covers it, but her reasons why she didn't really want to talk about that, and then she eventually let it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main reason she didn't really want to tell people about her past, and she does mention in the film that, like, it was sort of, she didn't want her son to know like the bad side of it, you know?
Right.
Um, she didn't, I think she felt ashamed. She didn't want people who knew her from the past to know how low she had, the rock bottom that she had hit,
Yeah.
and, everything that had happened to her. And she didn't want the people sort of from her present, back as Diane Luckey, no longer as Q Lazzarus, to know all these things that had happened to her. And she couldn't really tell them, oh, I was a rock star for 10 years and I had all these experiences, without explaining to them why she stopped and what happened and
Yeah.
why. Um, so I think it was sort of, she was a very proud woman. Um, and the reason she decided to tell it was basically because she met me. I also got into a cab she was driving, like Jonathan Demme, but 30 years later, I recognized her, um, and we started making the film. And she took that as a sign that it was time to go back to her music. Her
Yeah.
son at this point was a senior at FIT in college. She was like, okay, my son's going to be self-sufficient. This woman filmmaker got into my car and figured out that it was me. Like, she was a very spiritual woman. And um, she said, I can go back to my music now. And she knew that in order to do that, it was going to mean revisiting the
Yeah.
past.
Well, 5 years later, we're still kind of talking about the ramifications of the pandemic,
Yeah.
filmmakers having to deal with that,
Yeah.
films getting delayed. So you got caught up in the middle of that, and then her kind of restarting her career and having a
Hmm.
thing coming, and then the pandemic just kind of shuts all that down. How, two-part question. How
Hmm.
did you kind of deal with filming during the pandemic as a filmmaker, and also keeping up the same spirit, so to speak, of trying to tell this story during the pandemic? I
No,
mean,
solo una
did some of
entrevista,
that
por favor.
change with her where she may not have wanted to do it
Estoy
anymore? Or
filmando. I'm sorry, estoy filmando, por favor.
no, you're
Sorry, my 85-year-old father is just
That's okay.
forgetting that I'm having an interview that's being filmed. Um,
That's okay.
so
But
the
no,
pandemic, so the pandemic definitely, I, hurt and benefited this project. It hurt it because we started filming, October 2019, and within 6 months, you know, COVID broke out. I couldn't have a cinematographer, sound recordist anymore. We couldn't, obviously, the film was going to end with her comeback concert. I tracked
yeah,
down her bandmates from London. So all of that was like kept being delayed because, as you know, it wasn't just 2020 with COVID, it was also 2021 while everyone
right,
was waiting to be vaccinated and travel bans so that was like 2 lost years. That was 2 lost years. And the only and she also had to have a replacement surgery, which also got delayed because of COVID, because
sure,
hospitals weren't doing stuff like that. They were just trying to save people's lives. So the only thing that was good was we continued to film during COVID, and it just wound up being me and her.
right,
Even though I don't like to sort of be filming and sound recording and directing and producing and editing and everything at the same time, it was too much. There was no choice, but it did
right,
allow for this much more intimate, personal interaction between me and her. It made us very, very close. It made her really, so, it was kind of very sort of a mixed thing for us, the pandemic.
right. Uh,
Also in terms of the finishing the film and getting it out in the world, like, uh, I think the COVID led to a glut of documentaries.
yeah,
Between COVID and the writer's strike and the actor's strike, there were like thousands of documentaries made. And so it also made it harder for me to get this film out there,
right.
to
No,
sell
I
it. And,
understand the market kind of got saturated.
yeah.
Um, Up until she passed, because I know what we see in the film, but I would talk about the process of making the film. Did her spirit change? I mean, did she get to that point where she didn't want to do this, or was she still, I'm ready to tell my story and I'm ready to do this comeback concert?
Yeah, no, she was very excited about it. I mean, that's one thing that I take solace in the fact that, like, um, even though she tragically passed away before were able to, we filmed the end of the movie, and I lost a very good friend, and she isn't here now to see the release of the movie and the release of her first record. She
Yeah,
did know that all of this was coming, and her health, the health thing that sort of led to her passing away was sort of very unexpected and sudden. So I don't think she was very aware of the fact that that was happening either.
right. Um, so now being able to take all of her music and including this and stuff that has never been heard from the world, I wanted to ask you because didn't really look it up, but she has a record now, the music is out into the world. What's going on with that?
Mhm. So yeah, so Sacred Bones Records put out the soundtrack on February 21st, and the record is like 10 songs, but the digital album, the double CD, is like basically all 22, 23 tracks that are in the movie, including one instrumental one. And it basically consists of, you know, she had a lot more music, but it's sort of the songs that I thought were either the strongest, that I liked the best, combined with the ones that just worked in the film for,
Right.
it's literally the soundtrack to her life for,
Yeah.
one different parts of her biography and that worked in the film. Um, but as you said, like with Searching for Sugarman, I'm someone that think, I'm someone that knows about music, or I think I do, but like when I saw that film, I didn't know about Rodriguez. And the first thing I did was go and buy the record, you know? So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that it'll be a similar thing for Q with her record and
Oh,
um,
absolutely.
you know, yeah.
It's finally out there. Well, we got time for one more question.
Uh-huh.
It's our famous nerdy question that we ask
Uh-huh.
all of our filmmakers. It's the one you're not prepared for.
Mhm.
So here you go. If you could have a superpower to fight the forces of evil, what would you choose?
Um, I would have every murderer turn into an endangered species.
Basically, you're a wizard that just turns them into something and solves the problem.
Yeah, and something that is needed that we need more
Yeah,
of.
very much, very much. Good answer. Well,
Murderers and rapists, I would say.
oh yeah.
We don't need them either. Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing this film and for telling her story. Again, incredibly fascinating.
Mhm.
And for someone who, people who don't really know the history of the artist behind that song, that's still
Yeah.
being played today, and still popular. Um, Real quick, where are you? I know this film is getting there. Where are you off to next with this film?
So it's opening on Friday at the New Art in LA, at the Rio in London, and that's Friday, March 7th, and Friday, March 14th, it opens at the Village East here in New York, and then it's also going to be screening at a bunch of other cities, Denver, Austin,
Okay.
Seattle, Toronto. You can find all the screening info at the website goodbyehorsesmovie.com.
Okay. Well, we definitely want to get that out there and let people know that they
Mhm.
need to watch this film and know her story.
Yeah.
Again, it's incredibly fascinating. So,
Thank you so much, Marcus.